Emisión.net.
Hello again and welcome to Letter from England, broadcasting for AC Press and the Spanish Evangelical Alliance. My name is Jonathan Dawson. In the wake of the Spanish general election last month, we ask this week if the government is buying off religious minorities. But we do so because of the opinions of certain evangelical leaders reflecting on the general election. First, we should say what happened for anyone who might have missed it. José Luis Rguez Zapatero's Socialist Party were re-elected, but not with an overall majority. They in fact gained 5 seats, coming in as the largest party with 169 seats out of a total of 350. The opposition Popular Party had just 15 fewer at 154. And the main shift at the election was to increased polarization perhaps between the two parties, in the sense that all the other parties were squeezed. That can be shown by the fact that the third largest party is the Convergence or Convergencia party in Catalonia, with just 10 seats. The Basque nationalists have 6, and the remaining 11 seats are split between 6 minority parties. So really there are only 2 main political forces left in Spain at the current time, the Socialists and the the right of centre People's Party or Popular Party. Now, the situation then is that Spanish opinion has polarised into 2 camps. The Socialist Party have been heading up a series of political change in ethical and moral spheres. The most notable, or at least notorious, depending on your viewpoint, legislation from the last government was that of the legalization of homosexual marriage, and this time around it looks like being the legalization of euthanasia, among other issues, of course. The conflict between the Socialists and the Catholic Church has also become worse in recent years, and that leaves the Popular Party perhaps slightly unsure as to whether to break its moorings from its traditional ties to the Catholic Church itself, but also wanting to distance itself politically from the more antagonistic standpoint, as far as the Catholic hierarchy is concerned anyway, in the relations that they have with the Socialist Party. Well, that's enough of the politics in terms of the election results and the situation. What do leading evangelicals make of the election, as Zapatero tries to get minority party support to be able to form a government? We asked several leaders for their post-election reflections. Mariano Blázquez, Executive Secretary of the Federation of Evangelical Organizations, the official body that represents Spanish Protestants in dealings with the state, says he hopes that they can have constructive dialogue with the government on the issues which he believes still need to be resolved. He claims that their official relationship with the state is acceptable, and has been so with governments on both sides of the political divide, even though they have often given little consideration to the Protestant community in general. Blázquez does see a problem in what he calls the exceptional polarization of some evangelical institutions in recent months, with some leaders coming out clearly in favor of one party or another. He thinks evangelicals can be involved in politics, but by joining political parties and not by mixing politics into a denominational or church context. For his part, Jaume Llenas, the General Secretary of the Spanish Evangelical Alliance, was pleased at the high turnout. He notes the high level of support for the 2 main parties following several years which have been characterized by a strained political climate. He doesn't think the Socialist Party will make a pact, though it doesn't have an overall majority in Parliament, and he feels its religious policy will be much as before, and he views that as having both strengths and weaknesses. It's more open than any previous government in its dialogue, but Llenas says the creation of institutionalized links such as the Pluralism and Coexistence Trust, which gives state funds for cultural and social faith-based projects is not ideal either. He sees the laws passed by the socialists as a mixed bag. He approves of those which have advanced the cause, for example, of women's equality, but is unhappy at the liberalisation of abortion and believes more must be done to protect women from sexual exploitation by traffickers, a huge problem in Spain. He thinks the conflict between the government and the Catholic Church has not helped and hopes the government will become aware of the different needs of religious minorities. César Vidal, historian, writer and broadcaster, says he is very pessimistic about the future, believing the election victory will allow Zapatero to continue what he calls his social indoctrination, which will include the legalization of euthanasia, the extension of abortion, and the control of religious groups. Vidal believes things could get dangerous for evangelical churches which don't allow themselves to be bought or don't submit in silence. Well, he thinks the government's policy is to win over religious minorities through financial aid, with the aim of controlling them. He cites the new legislation on places of worship in Catalonia as an example of this, saying that it sets a worrying precedent. Finally, Vidal believes the government's social policy has failed miserably, costing the taxpayer money, but without any tangible benefit. He blames the conflict between the government and the Catholic Church on the fact that they are the only church Zapatero believes has any social weight, and adds that if at any stage evangelical churches start to annoy him, for instance over his euthanasia policy, he will take action against them. A very different view is given by José Antonio Cuenca, chairman of the Catalan Baptist Union. Now that's the group which put out a highly controversial statement just prior to the election, calling on the members of its denomination to vote for the left. Well, his view clearly is that the election result is very positive, because it will help, he says, to put an end to what he calls the Popular Party's conspiracy theory. Well, he certainly nailed his political colours to the mast, and he looks forward to the creation of a more secular state. He seems to have a rather utopian view of what the government can achieve over the next 4 years in all sorts of policy areas, looking forward to a complete church-state separation, though recognising that the Catholic Church will dig its heels in on that issue. However, he believes that evangelicals remain invisible and critical when our evangelicalism, he says, is reduced to an imported, sectarian, populist and right-wing neo-Gnosticism. Well, that's quite a mouthful. Well, by way of contrast, he believes the social legislation of the last government, which included the legalization of homosexual marriage, as we've said, to be, quote, a great advance. Though at the same time, Cuenca says we should still be critical and retain our prophetic voice. He does not believe church ethics can be imposed on state ethics. Presumably for church he means Christian, as he says they must govern for all based on human rights. And he says evangelicals should not get all upset over laws like the legalization of euthanasia because it would be symptomatic of our convictions not being well argued. He laments the fact that many people in Spain still see Christianity as Catholicism, and vice versa, presumably, yet blames those evangelicals who take up anachronistic positions, such as, he says, voting for the right. Cuenca concludes that such an attitude makes it logical that society identifies us with the Roman Catholic Church and dismisses us as irrelevant. And finally, Pedro Rguez, director of this news agency and Protestante Digital, says the fact that both the Socialists and the opposition Popular Party have strengthened their parliamentary positions at the expense of smaller parties means it's necessary to reach agreement on such issues as anti-terrorism policy and religious freedom. After the antagonism which characterized the last parliamentary term, he says it's about time that instead of condemning everything the other party does, that the two leading parties learn to support what is good in the other. As for relations with religious minorities, Rguez believes the government must avoid two mistaken ways of dealing with them. The first would be to treat them in accordance with the number of votes they represent, and the other would be to see their interests as similar to the Catholic Church. He says Protestantism is against the concept of hierarchy and the imposition of moral values or doctrine over convictions and reasoned arguments. He says of the conflict between government and church that while many see it as the state putting the Catholic Church in its place, it could lead to the relegation of religious values to the margins of society. Rguez concludes, therefore, that it's vital to stick to two basic Protestant principles: church-state separation and the freedom of speech and belief. He says, "I hope Spain really becomes a plural and democratic society in the short and medium term." Well, what to make of all of this? Well, I think we could agree with Rguez that Spain, we hope, or with his hope that Spain becomes a more consolidated and stable plural democracy. But is the government buying off religious minorities? Well, I'm frankly still concerned at the prospect of more state aid coming to faith-based organizations because of strings that could be attached, and because, to some degree, echoing Vidal's concern that the government could seek to control religious groups in this way. It seems that the position of the Federation of Evangelical Organizations is perhaps a little over-optimistic in terms of having influence over the government. The polarization of opinion is perhaps another worrying trend, though the positive side, as Rguez brings out, is that the government may well have to seek greater support from the Popular Party on major issues such as anti-terrorism, over which, of course, there should be all-party agreement. As for Cuenca's view, and that, view that people should vote for the left, this really was an astonishing statement put out by the Catalan Baptist Union, and quite out of place for a church organization. And to suggest that one particular party is involved in conspiracy, and to say that he doesn't understand how evangelicals can vote for a different kind of political party, really shows very little tolerance. It's also worrying that he doesn't see laws such as the legalization of homosexual marriage or euthanasia as of great concern to evangelicals. At least that would seem to be what he's saying. And saying that we shouldn't get upset over laws like these because it would just show that our convictions are not being well argued, is to sweep away and damn in one breath all attempts, such as those made by the Evangelical Alliance, in considered and thoughtful theological statements, which do argue against these laws. So what of the future? Well, Zapatero will have to tread carefully, first of all, to be able to govern, and govern in a stable and useful way. It will not be quite so easy, perhaps, for him in this term, this parliamentary term, to pass all the laws that he might have wished. And there is an opportunity for evangelicals to contribute positively by joining parties on all sides, or at least on both sides, of the political divide, and see, at least in part, that hope of Rguez is realized, that Spain becomes a more plural and democratic society. Thank you for listening to Letter from England. Goodbye for now.
Emisión.net